It's been a while since I've chatted about Apple's lineup, and I thought, what better time to do this than under quarantine and economic uncertainty with no sponsors in the pipeline to support this ridiculous channel. What's that? Oh, we do have one? Great! This video is brought to you by Hostinger. Hostinger, today's sponsor, is a fast and secure web host perfect for you and everyone you know. Be you an amateur looking to create your first WordPress website or an expert in need of more VPS for a sizable business. Look, Hostinger has something that will fit your needs. Learn more with the link below or stay tuned until the end of the video. Let's start with the Mac. The Mac lineup finally makes sense, in my opinion, for the first time in a really long time. I mean, look, just over a year ago, I was making a video about 3 different Apple laptops, the 12-inch MacBook, MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Air, which all cost within $100 of each other, but had vastly different specifications, features, use cases, and product life cycles. And I feel like today, in April 2020, that's no longer a thing. Apple has cleaned up the lineup significantly, and I think that things are finally properly segmented, and all machines seem to have a target market and use case without much price overlap. Things just still feel awkward to me. You see, Apple's 2 newest computers happen to be their cheapest and most expensive, MacBook Air and Mac Pro respectively. And while on the surface, these computers seem to have nothing in common, they do in one big area, and that's Intel. I can't mince words. Intel is blowing chunks. They're screwing the pooch. The jabronis are getting schooled by AMD, and it really doesn't look like that's going to be changing anytime soon. I mean, look, the new 2020 MacBook Air is using Intel's brand new 10th generation Ice Lake low power processors. And the performance, at least compared to the 2018 MacBook Air, seems to be decent, but it's still not great. By comparison, AMD's Ryzen 5 4600U, which is smack dab in the middle of their Ultrabook processor lineup, handily outperforms Intel's more expensive, highest-end i7 1065NG7. What a great product name, right? Which is a processor not even offered in MacBook Air. On the Mac Pro side of things, Apple's using the Intel Xeon Cascade Lake series, which seems to handle itself pretty well compared to AMD's Epic lineup, at least until you look at pricing. For example, the highest-end 28-core Mac Pro uses an Intel W3275M. M stands for Moolah, and that's a CPU that allows up to 1.5 terabytes of memory through the hexachannel RAM slots on Mac Pro. Now, the tray price of this CPU, what it costs customers, is $7,500. But what Apple doesn't tell you is that Intel sells the exact same chip with a max memory limit of 1 terabyte instead of 2 terabytes, which is theoretical, really, it's 1.5 terabytes in Mac Pro, for almost half that price, $4,500. And you'll see this trend in all but the lowest end Mac Pro processor. And I don't know what percentage of Mac Pro owners are pushing more than a terabyte of memory in their machine, but I suspect it's very few. What this means is that most Mac Pro customers are paying double for a CPU that they're never going to take advantage of. And I'd like to blame Apple on this, but I can't really, because having different CPU SKUs for supported memory capacities gets really confusing, and that's all because of Intel's BS. Their competitor, AMD, largely eliminates unnecessary feature lockdown. All Epic CPUs, for example, support 2 terabytes of memory by default. So why then would Apple, all right, we're not touching our faces. So why then would Apple continue to stay in business with a company that seems to be shanking the ball off of every tee box on every hole? Well, I have a couple of theories, and I think several of them have merit. For one, Apple demands millions of chips per year and requires a consistent supply of them, with which AMD's track record has honestly been frankly quite spotty. There might be exclusivity contracts that we, the public, just don't know about. The macOS kernel has been built for Intel, and while AMD Hackintoshes show that kernel rewrites can be done and that macOS can run just fine, doing this securely and with proper vetting takes time and resources. But my leading theory is this: money. Money? Apple? What? Yeah, listen, Apple historically has been with Intel because there was no other option. I mean, AMD was irrelevant for years. Nobody could compete. Now, AMD can, and Intel is becoming desperate. Better yet, Apple's in a great position because if you want macOS, you have one option and only one option: buy a computer from Apple. So it doesn't really matter what CPUs Apple uses because we'll buy them, which means they can stay with Intel and get excellent pricing while all of the other PC OEMs jump ship to compete in the specs war. Another reason Apple might not be switching to AMD or itching to switch, because they're probably jumping to their own ARM chips soon. This has been rumored for years, and while nobody can say exactly when it's going to happen, there are rumors that it will be as early as later this year. Color me skeptical, despite having prophesized this since 2013? We've seen what iPad Pro can do relative to its PC brethren, and it's incredible. I mean, in certain benchmarks, it's doing 70% as well in multi-core tests as my i9 MacBook Pro, which costs nearly 3.5 times more money. And it does it being a fraction of the size, it's completely silent, and with better battery life. Our Macs are going to be a big deal. But that doesn't mean they won't be without their downsides, and I talked about some of them in a video I made last year, which you should definitely check out if you haven't seen it. But all in all, the Mac is in a good place. Mac Pro is good for those who need it and can swallow the tremendously corpulent price tag. Though Apple just killed the 580X GPU, it's garbage, and just include the upcoming 5700 XT as the base model. That same GPU, the 580X, is in your $2,299 5K iMac that ships with a friggin' spinning hard drive. Say no to the 580X in a $6,000 computer, even though I didn't. iMac Pro. Okay. iMac Pro, in my opinion, needs a little bit of reworking. Relative to the Mac Pro, its value proposition is actually pretty good. I mean, it's $1,000 less. It comes with a gorgeous 5K display and a dual RAID 0 1TB NVMe SSD as opposed to the putrid 256 gig one found in Mac Pro. That said, you're right on the edge of thermal throttling. No expandability is offered, at least not unless you want to tear down the machine like I did, and trust me, you really don't want to do that. And to me, iMac Pro mostly feels like it was released to tide people over to the release of Mac Pro. And whether or not that's true, it largely feels unnecessary now. I mean, the regular iMac frequently outbenches it in certain workloads thanks to the T2 chip and Intel's internal graphics, along with an additional dedicated GPU, which is something you don't get using a Xeon in iMac Pro, and it does it for $1,000 less. In my opinion, iMac Pro should move back down to consumer Intel CPUs, but with support for quad-channel memory as opposed to the iMac's current dual-channel configuration. It should maintain the same awesome striped SSDs. It should keep the 10 gig LAN and offer higher-end video card options than the iMac. These features are enough, I think, to adopt the Pro moniker. And maybe, just maybe, iMac Pro could be the platform for this crazy rumor that Apple's making a gaming PC. Oh man, I have a ton of thoughts on this, so give this video a like if you're interested in seeing that. On the other hand, like I mentioned, I think the iMac is great and it needs very little attention. The 5K display is still best in class. The form factor, well, a lot of people seem to say it's becoming dated. I think it looks fine. Although I wouldn't mind a slimming down of the bezels, perhaps in a more squared design approach a la iPad Pro and Pro Display XDR. But Apple does need to get rid of two things that are absolutely unacceptable in a computer of this price, or really of this decade. First, the base model $1,100 iMac still has a 7th generation dual core CPU and a 1080p display. What? For just $200 more, you double your core count, you get a dedicated GPU, and a 4K screen. Apple, kill that baseline iMac. It is abysmal and completely unacceptable. My second gripe, every single iMac has a Fusion drive as the base configuration for storage. A spinning hard drive as a boot volume in 2020. What? This is also unacceptable. And in the next iMac refresh, Apple just needs to say goodbye to spinning storage. SSDs should be the norm. They should have been the norm for years now, and you definitely shouldn't include an SSD lower than 512 gigs, even at the lowest price point. Next up, the 16-inch MacBook Pro. I reviewed it back in November, and my thoughts have remained largely the same. The bigger size is actually, in my opinion, the least noteworthy upgrade. The battery life is excellent, even better than it was. Thermal throttling seems to be basically resolved, thank goodness, and the abysmally unreliable, awful butterfly keyboard is gone. And it's back to having a pretty awesome keyboard again, and that's great. I don't know what more it needs. The 13-inch MacBook Pro, on the other hand, is in the danger zone right now. Do not buy it. The rumored 14-inch should be around the corner any day now, but more so than spec bumps and size increases, you just really gotta avoid that butterfly keyboard, man. It's in the current model and it's terrible. And I know some of you haven't had issues yet and you're gonna be typing down in the comments saying, hey, my keyboard's great. That's great, good for you. You're lucky. These problems have been widespread and they're scary and nobody should buy a butterfly keyboard MacBook as far as I'm concerned. MacBook Air? Well, we kind of already talked about the MacBook Air, but people love that machine, and I don't. Look, the 12-inch MacBook was a dream come true for me. I loved that machine. It was so tiny and so light, and sure, it was slow, but that's okay because that's what you compromised for on such a tiny fanless laptop. The 13-inch MacBook Air is not the 12-inch MacBook. It's not small. It's nearly the same size and weight as the 13-inch MacBook Pro. It's just a lot slower than that machine. But there's something important here that wasn't there last year. $999. Part of the magic behind the prior MacBook Air that we all loved so much was the price, and that has returned. If you can forego a better display, which you'll get on MacBook Pro, a better processor, which you'll get on MacBook Pro, and better speakers, which you'll get on MacBook Pro, $1,000 gets you a respectable machine with great battery life and a keyboard that won't murder your whole family. So that's good. I give it a thumbs. Mac Mini just got fake updated by Apple last month. The storage doubled for the price, but it's still using old 8th generation Intel CPUs from 2018. Price to performance is rather poor, and its small size really isn't even that small anymore. I mean, just look at the Intel NUC. I basically suggest that everyone stay away from Mac Mini, though I say that as a guy who literally just bought one to install in a server rack, so do as I say and not as I do. Sick of the Mac? Okay, fine. Let's talk iPad. The updated 2020 iPad Pro has a lot of people up in arms because it's, quite frankly, a very minor update. A secondary camera has been added to the back, which, if I'm being honest, has really been bothering me because my fingers keep bumping against it. But the cameras are good. If you mostly just scan documents and do occasional FaceTime calls like I do, you might be wondering, does the iPad really need a good camera? Not really, but for AR, it'd be handy, and it's clear that Apple is focused on augmented reality with its new LIDAR sensor. Now, right now, this sensor does very little. Apple's Measure app is a little more accurate, although only marginally, and the new sensor does allow you to mask AR objects, which is kind of cool, but it seems like a whole lot of hoopla over nothing. Given the weird release time of iPad Pro, this seems to be hardware to basically just get it into developers' hands for what will ultimately be coming to iPhone in the fall. And what I'm guessing is that during the online WWDC seminars this year, we'll see what Apple's grand plans are for this sensor, because right now I'm thinking, huh? You might have also heard that people are pissed about this new A12Z Bionic chip. I went into a lengthy thread on Twitter, which I'll link below, about part binning and how it's very common in the SoC industry. I honestly don't think it's that big a deal that the new iPad is basically just using the old chip with one additional GPU core. That old iPad's 2 years old, so it's a pretty minor update, but this iPad is still insanely fast, and Apple's likely waiting to do a massive chip redesign on iPad until after the 5G-capable A14 ships in iPhone 12 this fall. I bet late this year or early next year, we'll see an A14X for iPad Pro with 5G. Oh, one last thing. I'm really excited about the Magic Keyboard, and if I might, thanks for making this backwards compatible with the 2018 iPad Pro, Apple. Very cool and very unexpected from you. Look, I've been mocking Apple for years because every time they say that a touchscreen MacBook doesn't exist because, well, nobody wants to strain their arm by lifting it up and touching the screen, I laugh in irony because that's exactly what the iPad Pro has been. And they're right, it's not comfortable to have to use your arm to poke on a display. So now that iOS apps have made their way to the Mac with cursor support via Catalyst, and they seem to be, okay, it only makes sense that that would be offered as an option on iPad Pro. Don't get me wrong, iPad Pro is still a touch-first OS, but having additional input methods is seldom a bad thing. Maybe now I can finally get my touchscreen MacBook. But I'll be reviewing the Magic Keyboard when it ships this May. iPad Air is a weird one, okay? It's $500, which isn't a bad deal per se, but it's in the middle of two really great products, the $800 iPad Pro and the $330 iPad, which you can frequently find for $250. We just bought one, and it's actually our teleprompter, and for $300, this thing is insane. Okay, no, it doesn't have a laminated screen, but it's Retina with the same PPI as iPad Air and iPad Pro. It's only 0.3 inches smaller diagonally than iPad Air. It has Apple Pencil support and the A10 Fusion SoC, which, while now a little bit dated, still feels lightning quick. It's probably the best value product Apple sells, period. That's even at MSRP at $330. You can find these oftentimes for around $200, which is insane. iPad gets a huge thumbs up from me. But that means that the weird, oldish looking iPad Air seems like not a great value, especially that it's gone the longest without an update. I just can't really recommend it. Speaking of things I can't really recommend, iPad mini. I loved my iPad mini. In fact, I still have it right here. This is an iPad mini 2 from 2013. And we had actually been using it as a teleprompter up until last month. We just recently retired it because our prompter software began feeling a bit sluggish. But the most recent iPad mini has the same resolution as the iPad mini 2 from 2013. It has the same form factor, the same Touch ID sensor. The only thing that's updated other than a laminated screen is it now supports an A12 SoC, just like iPad Air. It also supports Apple Pencil and starts at $399, which is just, quite frankly, insane in my opinion. I guess for those that still want a small form factor tablet, iPad mini is basically your only option. But I think as phones have gotten bigger, desires for small tablets have all but disappeared. And I think that's proof in how frequently this thing has been updated. Kind of a bummer. iPhone. I'm still carrying both an iPhone 11 Pro and a Galaxy Z Flip, and I am enamored by them both. And no, this folding phone has not gotten any less fun over the months since my review. But iPhone stays in my pocket for a reason. It's just, it's excellent. No, it doesn't have the flashiest new tech. Yes, the notch is still rather big, but when you review smartphones, you come to appreciate reliability and dependability. That's the reason that most YouTubers you watch either carry an iPhone exclusively or, like me, carry an Android phone with an iPhone in the other pocket. The iPhone 11 Pro has fantastic cameras, the battery life is insanely good, the display is bright and pretty with a responsive touch layer, app support is plentiful and reliable, it's fast as a whip, and it has never given me a reason to reboot or scratch my head wondering why things aren't working. It's just, it's bang on, man, even if it's boring. But being boring is why I carry this other phone in my pocket. There's still many months to go until iPhone 12 in 2020, but I'm excited for these new models for a number of reasons. First off, rumors indicate that it's going to go back to a squarish form factor, similar to iPad Pro, which will be the first time we've seen a squared iPhone since the iPhone 5S. Rumors also suggest 4 new models, a 5.4-inch, 2 6.1 inches, and a massive behemoth 6.7-inch model. 6.7 inches, that's like the iPad mini, basically. Presumably, the LIDAR sensor found in iPad Pro is going to make its way over as well. And yeah, man, I'm stoked. New designs are always great, but more importantly, and what I'm most excited for, is the new size. I am so sick of huge phones, but I don't move to small phones because small phones are known as worse phones. These new iPhone 9, SE2, whatever the heck we're going to call it, rumors are circling around like crazy. And cool. I'm glad that that phone is going to exist for those on a budget and for those that hate Face ID or the gesture system. But I'm happy to finally be getting a small phone that's just as powerful as the big ones. A flagship small handset. I guess that leaves us with Apple Watch, AirPods, HomePod, and services. So rapid fire time. Apple Watch is the best on the market, and nobody is even close. Wear OS is a joke, and Google should be ashamed. Apple Watch continues to get better every year, and while I don't personally think that the design of newer models are even as good as the older models, I just look at the Series 2 watch. The crown is more distinguished and present. It has a more square, more substantial, more intentional design, and it just looks, man, it looks good. I think Apple knows that they own the market and they can make Apple Watch look like whatever they want now and people are still going to buy it. So they've capitalized on adding health features and increasing battery life in exchange for design. And I think that's great. Some days, I even wish I didn't love real mechanical watches because Apple Watch is just so solid. But I also legitimately think that I use my phone less than Apple Watch people, which is kind of funny because people think that the Apple Watch decreases their dependency on phones. I think it increases. I mean, look, everyone's different. And maybe just at the end of the day, this is a boomer thing to say, but it's kind of annoying when you're talking to someone and they're just looking at their wrist like this and they're like, and you're like, are you even listening to me? And it's like, AirPods are expensive, but they're honestly, I hate how much I like them. I think that the AirPods Pro are the ones to get, and go check out my review if you haven't seen that already. Although the standard AirPods, they still best a lot of truly wireless buds on the market. They don't have the best sound, but they just work all the time. And when you're talking about Bluetooth, that's important. I'm cautiously skeptical, but also excited for the rumored over-ear AirPods. Headpods? Airheads? I don't know. HomePod is not very good, and I laughed when I went back and watched my original review because almost all of my criticisms in that video, which is now years old, are still valid, and Apple has fixed almost none of the annoyances that I had. I do use one on my desk as a small footprint speaker, and it's fine, but that's really the best review I can give it. Talking about services, we could go ad nauseum, but I'm really only going to talk about Apple TV, which seems to be doing well. Although other than the morning show, I really haven't found a program that has really captured my attention. I'm just too busy watching original content from Netflix and Amazon, along with the premium cable providers like HBO, FX, and AMC, which I personally find, frankly, way better than anything Apple TV offers. We'll see how many people cancel their subscriptions once that 1-year free thing expires later this year. But for right now, you can put me in the camp of, I'm probably going to cancel. This episode has been sponsored by Hostinger, the best web host around. At the end of last year, and look, I'm a busy guy, I created snazzy2019.com. But it wasn't a problem because this website took maybe 30 minutes to make. I navigated to Hostinger's excellent H-panel software and used the setup wizard, which allowed me to register a domain, create a managed WordPress install. It got me a theme up and running, and then I actually created the entire website with a visual editor in maybe 30 minutes. Look, if you're the tech guy in your family and everyone comes to you for help, this is a great solution rather than hosting and creating everything yourself. You get it set up for them, you give them the keys, and then they figure it out. If you are a power user, however, looking for a little bit more, Hostinger offers both VPS and cloud hosting services with support for things you'd expect, like domain email, native Cloudflare protection, free backups, an SEO toolkit, FTP and MySQL access, and more. But best of all, unlike shady web hosts that upsell and have hidden fees, Hostinger makes clear the charges that you'll incur before you incur them, and includes a lot of typically premium features like SSL certificates and Whois privacy free, depending on your plan. Try Hostinger today at hostinger.com/snazzy and get 91% off when you use my discount code SNAZZY. And really, that's everything you need to know about Apple in 2020, or at least my interpretations of it. If you made it this far, pat yourself on the back, celebrate 6 feet away from others. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. That other button works if you didn't. But most importantly, and as always, stay snazzy. Stay safe, stay home. See you later, folks.